Welcome to Field Talk, the podcast that brings interesting people from various fields to you, providing insights and inspiration for your own journeys. I'm your host, Craig Sheffield, and today's episode, we're joined by Edward Gonzalez, a restaurant owner and podcast host based in Taiwan. I first heard of Eddy through the Taiwan Impact Entrepreneurs Facebook group, and his persistence and energy left a lasting impression on me. With over 15 years of experience in the restaurant industry and 5 years of podcasting under his belt, Eddy's journey is a testament to dedication and innovation in the bustling city of Taipei. Throughout the episode, Eddy shares his experiences in navigating cultural differences in food preferences, sourcing local ingredients, and creating a vibrant restaurant atmosphere. We also explore his journey as a podcaster, the lessons he's learned from being an entrepreneur, and his perspectives on leveraging technology to enhance his business and podcast. So buckle up and get ready to immerse yourself in the captivating world of food, business, and podcasting. It's going to be a delicious, insightful conversation that you won't want to miss. So let's get creative. All right, Ed, how you doing today?
Good. Wow, that's quite an intro, man. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm great. Yeah.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you here. I'm glad you can make the time. I know life is busy with families and everything that comes up. I understand had some issues with your family this morning, so we rescheduled to a little bit later, but we're still getting it done. I hope everything was okay with that.
Yeah, sure. Just a daughter just had a little bit of the sniffles and we wanted to take her on the weekend, but the weekend was just super busy with the restaurant and then doctors don't really open on weekends for very long anyway. So yeah, just juggling. And this morning I thought, okay, let's just get this done and then, do a half day for her. So yeah, no problem. All is good.
All right. Excellent. Well, I know you've done a lot of content creation and you have a lot of things out there that people can definitely go check out. And I will provide links in the show notes for all of those things, of course. But can you just tell me a little bit about your journey of being a restaurant owner in Taiwan for the past 16 years?
Sure. So about 20 years ago, I moved to Taiwan and I decided I would like to stay out here for maybe 1 or 2 years to get some experience, maybe learn a little bit of the language. And probably it's a common thing that you hear out here. You come for 1 or 2 years and you're stuck. It's a great place. People are nice. Weather's nice. Food is good. I don't know. It's kind of like living on vacation sometime, and then I don't know. I met my wife. We eventually, she wasn't my wife at the time. Eventually we got married and I talked to her and her sort of dream was a coffee shop. And I told her that at the time, even a long time ago, there were plenty of coffee shops everywhere. And I told her, well, you like, my family's food. My family is Mexican. So we eat Mexican food at home all the time. And I said, well, this is what we can do. If you want, we can try this because, coffee, although now I am starting to enjoy coffee. Originally, I wasn't really a big coffee guy. And so for me to be kind of all of a sudden the coffee connoisseur man it's pretty fake. And I don't really like that vibe. So yeah, I was born in Canada. Both parents are from Mexico. So yeah, we would do Mexican food at home all the time. And I've been here for, 20 years. And I think more now. It's a blur. I think maybe 21 years. The restaurant's about, right. The restaurant's about 16 or so. Started in a night market in Danshui. Yeah, I think 15, 16 years ago. Yeah, maybe more now. And we did that for 1 year. It was all right. We wanted to test the market, wanted to see if people would actually eat the food. Because at that time, there was zero Mexican food. So we thought, let's try that. And the funny thing is, at that time, there was a lot of Indian sort of stalls at night markets, like with the roti and the naan and stuff like that, sort of like Indian wraps. And so when we opened up our burrito stand, everybody just thought we were Indian. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not Indian. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we had Indian already this week. And I'm just like, no, it's not Indian. So it was kind of the education thing. And at the beginning, it was fun. Did the stall for a year, then moved to a very small restaurant in a less busy area in Danshui, not too far from where the stall was. Did that for, I would say, 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And then we moved to the Tianmu area. We had a good opportunity to come out here. So we had sort of a medium-ish sized place out here. And eventually we did two out here, sort of a big one and the medium one we had at the time. And about 2 months before COVID, it was just getting to be too much. It was hard to find staff. It was just, they were both really busy. It was good, but it seemed like we were working twice as much and making the same or less, right? So we thought, okay, well, let's sell off the little one. I knew a guy who was looking for a place. I sold him the little one, and he turned it to a little Italian place that's still there, still doing well. And we focused on the big one. For the big one, we actually had an investor in the beginning. And so we bought them out. Everything is all sort of settled. So that's ours. But it's good. And through COVID, we were pretty lucky to just have one. If we would have had two, that would have sucked. Would have been pretty rough. Even one was rough. But yeah, so things were going really amazing. And then COVID came and it's almost like a reset button, almost, quite back, almost back to zero with COVID. And then sort of the swing back up is there. It's coming. It's not quite back to where it was pre-COVID, but yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. I think that's the short version.
I hear you. I mean, covering, all your time in Taiwan and then, over 15 years of building this business that you've had. I completely understand. Can you just tell me a little bit more about night markets? Just because I haven't had a whole lot of guests on from Taiwan, and the night market scene may be not familiar to everybody, but I think it's awesome. If you come to Taiwan, like you said, you're almost certainly going to love it. Most people fall in love with it for various reasons, right? You said it feels like you're on vacation constantly, kind of. Everything's so convenient compared to where I'm from, where you just have to travel an hour or 30 minutes or whatever just to do something you want to do. You got to hop in a car. Here, I don't care that much because I can use public transportation. But, the night market scene's unique, I feel like, here. And you did a business in here. My partner did a business a long time ago where I believe she sold things like drinks. That's a common thing. And then clothing, of course, and night markets are super common. But, a lot of people go to night markets just to browse the food. And while I haven't been to a lot of night markets up in your area of Taiwan, I've been to many night markets and I usually like them. But the night markets are traditionally Taiwanese, food. So I could see why people would come up to your stand and go, oh, yeah, we already had Indian food. Because they're not expecting to even see hardly any diversity there, is what I would guess. So, how did you overcome those challenges of a new market, new people that don't know this thing?
It was tough. At the beginning, like I said, there wasn't any other Mexican food. And I mean, there's popping up here and there. There's a few out there. But yeah, at the time, there was nothing. And the good thing about Taiwan is that they're down to try new stuff, right? If you open a new place, it doesn't really matter what it is. You hang the red pineapples and stuff and people are like, oh, there's a new place. And they want to go try it out. So when you open something, it's good. It's a good chance to get new customers in. And for us, it was tough. You explain Mexican food and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, if they liked it, then they kind of were interested in learning more. And if they didn't like it, then they were like, okay, we don't like Mexican food, But it's a tough one. We probably should have started with tacos, different kinds of tacos. But my idea was I wanted to do, the beans and the rice and, the filling and stuff like that. So we started with burritos and in Taiwan, as they sort of eat their beans here, sweet. If you go to a soybean place, a shaved ice place, one of the toppings is beans cooked with condensed milk and stuff like that. So sweet beans. Yeah. So when we eat our beans kind of savory, garlicky and stuff like that. So that for them was a big one. So yeah, now at the restaurant, of course, we still do have burritos, but a first time Taiwanese customer, we will guide them towards enchiladas or fish tacos or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have another buddy who opened up a restaurant business here and, trying to talk to him about, are you having to change your taste palette to fit local taste, right? Like you said, beans are typically sweet here, which I love as well. I've learned to love, rather. I just didn't know that before. Yeah. But yeah, when I eat beans, I typically think of something savory, like you said. So you're kind of defying people's expectations, and then you're
Yeah.
getting them to try something in a different way. Or did you change any of your recipes or like change any of your, I don't know, the way you presented things to people other than like, try this instead of that?
So that's always like one of the first questions that people ask, because it's very hard to get it exactly the same way as we get it back home, because we use local vegetables. We use all the stuff that's available here. That's the stuff that we use. And of course, for Mexican food, a lot of stuff is not available here, right? So we use the ingredients we have here to make it as close as possible to what we get back home. And yeah, so it's a little bit different naturally because the vegetables and stuff are going to be different. But yeah, we haven't, what's the word, like intentionally altered any of the recipes. We just kind of, in Mexico, for example, you know, if you want to get dried chilies and stuff like that to make different sauces, there's hundreds of different, you know, variants of dried chilies. Whereas here, there's nothing, right? So we've had to find like local farmers and stuff like that, who super niche farmers that'll grow jalapenos or that'll grow, you know, habaneros and ghost peppers and stuff like that. And, you know, after being in business for a while, you slowly, you meet more and more of these guys. And, you know, whenever they have a batch, they call us up and they're like, hey, we got 6 kilos of habanero, you know, 3 kilos of ghost, you know, 2 kilos of ghost of Carolina Reaper. You know, what do you guys want? And we just take everything.
Yeah, sweet, man.
Yeah.
I grew up in Texas, so like I'm very familiar with that cuisine or
Okay.
certain, you know, variations of that cuisine. It's not as if it's one thing. But you know, the one pepper I miss the most, I think, is Serrano. I you know, like I just don't get it. I don't see it.
It's some of those farms will have them sometimes, but yeah, the problem is if it's not a popular item, then they just stop growing it. Like the really spicy ones, like we'll make hot sauces and stuff out of it, and sometimes people will buy them and stuff like that. But they're not. You know, people are always telling me, how come there's not more, you know, fresh jalapenos? And I'm like, because nobody knows what to do with them here, you know? So, you know, there's really no, I guess, no demand. So for us, we buy a lot of them. And when there's when they're available, if it's a massive amount, you know, 10 or 15 kilos or whatever, we'll use a lot of it. We'll make hot sauces. We'll make poppers out of them. And we'll also like sell them to customers and stuff, because customers like to pickle their own chilies and stuff like that. So yeah, so sometimes I'll post on Facebook. I'll be like, hey, you know, I'm not going to sell all, but I've got like, you know, 3 or 4 extra kilos of, you know, fresh grown in Taiwan jalapenos. And if anybody wants, let me know. I mean, it's not expensive. So yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
That's sweet. Well, for those of you listening that you're in Taiwan, you want some fresh chili or some kind of pepper, maybe hit you out, right?
Yeah. A couple times a year. Yeah. It's not all that often.
If you're in that, you're just lucky enough.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could, you know, with all the things that have gone on in your life, I mean, I'm sure just before you even came here, including that, you know, are there any pivotal moments that kind of shaped how you came to be like this, you know, content creator and restaurant owner?
Yeah. So basically, I came here as a soccer coach and an English teacher, right? So I coached soccer here for a long time. I stopped maybe 5 or 6 years ago because I just got too busy. But one of the sports that I still to this day like to watch is I like to watch UFC. You know, I like to watch MMA and stuff like that. And I've always been a big fan of Joe Rogan, right? So Joe Rogan obviously has probably the biggest podcast in the world. And it's funny because when I first heard about it, I didn't know he was a comedian. I didn't know he had a podcast. I just knew that he was a commentator for the UFC. And then somebody mentioned that. This was obviously a long time ago. And I went to check it out, and he was interviewing fighters and interviewing sort of different personalities and business owners and stuff. And I loved it. I thought it was such a great format. And I thought, okay, well, maybe someday I could do something like that. And yeah, I just decided one day, you know what, I want to try this. And of course, when you start a podcast, you know, it's tough because people are like, oh, another podcast or stuff like that. And people will think, you know, one guy actually told me, I just remember this one customer who I was mentioning it to once. And he's like, well, let me ask you a question. And I'm like, oh God, this is one of those really sarcastic guys, right? He said, does the world really need another podcast? Right? I thought, oh God, here we go. And I thought, well, you know what? I want to try to do it. I'll start with some friends and then different restaurant owners and stuff like that. And then kind of expand from there. And that's kind of what I did. I got to meet different restaurant owners, different, like I said, I like to watch UFC. So I got, pretty tight with like the community here, the MMA community. I'll have some fighters and stuff on. And because I like to do it I do it on YouTube, right? We do it live on YouTube. Yeah. I've met different YouTubers here and stuff like that. And I've had these guys up and it's cool because I get to learn a lot from them because, some of these guys are full-time YouTubers, right? And I mean, I'm a business owner and a dad and, I've got the family and I've got so many things going on. So my time is pretty limited to put, into, the podcast / YouTube channel. And so I try to kind of multitask. And again, Joe Rogan was the only sort of podcast that I was watching at the time. And basically he just goes live, right? He just hits the button, he goes live, and then he kind of makes clips after. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. So I figured I'm going to learn, one software and I did all the research and I learned about OBS Studio. And so I use OBS Studio. I'm not a master, but that's, I'm pretty decent with it. And I thought, okay, this, and then you sort of add little bits and pieces to your podcast. So yeah, to this day, I still go live. And I think that it's also another dynamic to the restaurant. We do it on like a Tuesday night, which is usually not the busiest night. And so, I have a little piece of the restaurant and I go live and, we put the speakers and the TVs on and stuff like that. And I get to, bring in, I've had people, like CFO of Gogoro in, I've had students, I've had other podcasters, I've had, YouTubers with, 500,000-600,000 subs. I've had, other people with restaurants down the street and stuff like that, just kind of sharing, the Taiwan story, and then, yeah, stuff like that. And it's fun. It's for me, it kind of keeps me sane, I think, because there's so many things going on in my life. And for that 1 hour, I mean, of course I need to prepare, but sort of for that 1 hour, I get to be a little bit selfish and just kind of hang out and have a beer or a coffee or whatever and just chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I really enjoyed that aspect. I made it a point maybe a year or so ago where I told myself, all right, I'm not the most social guy. I just don't go out and do this type of thing, but I want to make it a point to go out and talk to people, like have a real conversation with somebody about, their background and blah, blah, blah. And this was even before I thought about really seriously starting a podcast. And
Nice.
It just turns out that this is like killing two birds with one stone for me, where I get to
100%.
talk to you, I get to learn from
Yeah.
you, and then I get to share all of that experience. So it's great that, you're essentially doing the same thing. You're talking about the things you
Yeah.
love, in the place, a business that you have, that you're very passionate about as well. So it ticks a lot of boxes. And I think it's great that you're doing that. Like you said, sharing people's stories and also giving the people a taste of like Taiwan and what it's like here. Are there any memorable episodes or anything you could share that may be a favorite story?
Like I said, I'm a big sort of like a MMA fan. And I remember it was a while ago where I had one of the sort of Taiwan's first professional MMA women's fighter. So there's another sort of UFC style thing called 1FC, which is like the Asia UFC basically. And it's pretty huge. And so this girl, I was introduced to her, through a friend. She was training at a UFC gym here and her name is Jenny Huang. And she had, got all the way on, on a win streak and she fought for the world title. Like she's really good. She still fights now. And so, she fights in an octagon, a one-on-one in a cage and she's amazing. And I remember inviting her and I just kind of see her fight and she's wearing, the fight outfit and stuff like that. And just, she looks good, but she's looking normal, whatever, like, and when she came by, she was like done right up. Like she totally had dressed up and she got her hair done and she came in and she had like all her like gold and stuff from winning fights and stuff. And I was just, shoot, I got nervous. I was like, oh man, I feel I need to make sure this is a good one. And that one just happened to be in Chinese, right? In Mandarin. So I was kind of like already doubly nervous. And before we started, we're sitting there. I'm like, okay, we're going to go live in a second here. And she's just like, okay, hold on. She's nervous. And I'm like, you fight in a cage. Like what? How? I'm just, a guy here having a coffee with you. So yeah, I learned from that, yeah, it's my job to kind of make people comfortable. And Yeah, there's been a few episodes that were really, really good. I mean, a lot of them were good. There've been a few, as you can probably guess, there's a few duds in there, but, what can you do, right? It's like I said, it's a live thing and you try to do your best. And some people just, I don't know, they don't like to, I don't know, the camera goes on and they don't like to talk. Some people they know it's live. So they kind of make you sweat a little bit. They want to make you look like a fool sometimes. So I don't get very many of those anymore because I have a more strict sort of filtering process now. So yeah, there's a few weird ones in there for sure.
All right, cool. Yeah, I definitely went through some of your YouTube clips and videos out there and noticed that, like, some of these videos, they've got, almost 4,000 views
Yeah.
on a number of them. So, I mean, some of them have definitely blown up. I've noticed that
Yeah.
you've gone to the trouble of like adding Chinese subtitles
Oh,
to
that's
some of
hard.
them so they're more accessible to Chinese speakers. You could even use these as like learning tools, I suppose, if you wanted to practice your English and get a handle on that if you're a Chinese speaker. Anyway, it's amazing that you can also do interviews in Mandarin to me because my Mandarin's so basic. So even after living in Taiwan for 10 years, I
Yeah.
still feel so humbled when I speak to somebody in Mandarin.
Yeah, no, Mandarin, for me with the restaurant is when I really was forced to use it. So again, I'm also pretty introverted person. So before I came to Taiwan, I was just like, well, I was the super shy, super quiet, super introverted person. And then, when you came here, I was by myself and I thought, well, I'm not going to last very long if I'm just kind of hiding in my room after work. So I slowly just, started to go out and hung out with some of my friends and teachers and started to meet some people start to push myself to get out of, that introverted, sort of mindset. And then I still am an introvert, like, deep down, but I have to really push myself to get more extroverted. Sorry. And yeah, it's helped me a lot because I feel being introverted, probably the first half of my life, I missed a lot of opportunities because I just would not volunteer or raise my hand, or I would always say no to everything. And then after coming in here and switching it up and just as an experiment, switching to being a sort of an extroverted introvert, let's just say, yeah, things have been good. It's popped up a lot of things more popped up for me. And yeah, it's been pretty good, man. It's been a pretty good process, I think.
Yeah. I have to, like I said earlier, I had to take like conscious effort to really get out
Yeah.
there and do that stuff for myself. I know you primarily have the restaurant and the podcast. I don't know. Do one of those like take priority, in your life? Is like the restaurant's like the main,
Yeah.
breadwinner and you got to
Yeah.
do that? Or it's like the podcast, you'd like that to be higher? Like, how do you go
Yeah.
about balancing all that stuff? Not to mention, your family.
So basically the restaurant has to take the priority because that is the breadwinner, right? But I do have a pretty good team. I work with my wife and that obviously has pros and cons, right? But yeah, the restaurant, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. Yeah. And I have my team is pretty good. If I need, like, this weekend, we were slammed and, I went in to check it out and it was just packed. So I went to the kitchen and I saw all these slips of tables and orders. And I'm like, okay. So I washed up, put the mask and the hat on and stuff. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I helped out for these 2 days. Monday's the day off, which is good because then I can kind of book the things I want to do. That's kind of when I prep my own podcast stuff. So yeah, the podcast is definitely secondary, but I would like it to be bigger. So as you mentioned, the Chinese subtitles, I've tried different softwares for that. And I'm currently working with one software company that's just kind of almost done with making sort of like the dual subtitle things, happen. And then eventually I met a girl who does like a kind of like translation stuff. So my goal is to give her like as close to a finished product as possible and then have her go over the subtitles and then fix that. Cause for me to just be like, here's the English, do all the subtitles, it's going to be long and expensive. So I'm trying to get it to as close as possible to finished and then kind of hand it over to the next person to finish the last 5 or 10 or 15%. So that's the plan. When I talk to a lot of the YouTubers here, they also started, with no Chinese subtitles. And as soon as they add them, that's kind of when their channel explodes. And they're like, you got to do the subtitles, man. And you got to have, the Chinese before the English for your your title, and then you got to have the thumbnail and all that stuff. And so yeah, it's definitely cool to have a connection with a lot of these guys, because if I have ever any questions, I just hit them up on like Line or Instagram or something, and they respond right away. So yeah, good people. Shout out to them. Probably Lucas in Taiwan is probably the one that's helped me the most. And the funny thing was, when I started my podcast, you start something, and I had these like karaoke mics, and the audio wasn't great. And I had like this old GoPro, and the video wasn't great. And at the time I thought, wow, this is great, and I'm looking for if anybody else is doing something like that in Taiwan 5 years ago. And I didn't find anything, but then I found Lucas in Taiwan, and I thought, oh my gosh, his is better. His is better than mine. And so, yeah, I hit him up a long time ago, and I figured, I wouldn't get a response. And he definitely replied right away, and he came over and we chatted, and he's kind of like the YouTube guru for me. So he's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that about content creators in general. I feel like they're willing to share, this type of information versus if you went to like a company that has a podcast or a channel of their own, and you're like, well, who do I talk to
yeah,
do
exactly.
that? It's not as easy to go through that chain of command.
Agreed.
Yeah. What can you tell us a little bit more about, like maybe actually I want to ask you more about the restaurant, if you don't mind, because, I have, like I said, I have a friend who has a restaurant business, and there's like a bubble, and I'm sure you went through this as well. And I think they just kind of crossed over this, so they figured out a way to get over it. But, you have enough business where you're sustainable, right? But it's kind of like you and somebody else running it. It's like all of your energy just to get it going. And then you kind of reach that point where you're like, I'd like somebody else to come in here and help me. And then becomes this like trust issue, this reliability issue. Like it complicates things so much. Like, how do you vet people? How do you go about that process? And, just what are words of advice you could share?
That's a tough one, because, like example for us in the beginning was just me and my wife. And then it got to be too busy for, just the two of us. And then you start to hire people, and they don't make it exactly like you make it. They don't care as much as you care, right? Because, they're employees, right? And they're just there to do their thing. And I think that I've read a lot of books about it. Sort of like the first one I read is The E-Myth. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. The E-Myth Revisited. I can't remember the guy who wrote it. Great book. And he basically, in that book, he goes through, it's kind of like, the book is like him interviewing a lady who just opened a bakery. And it's basically the same thing that you said. And she's like, how am I going to find someone to do this? And yeah, so eventually you have to like delegate it. You have to sort of delegate stuff. And it's really hard. It's a mindset change, because you're basically self-employed, right? When you're running it, and, you're doing pretty good and stuff like that. And it's kind of like mom and pop shop level, and it's good. But then if you want to go to like a full blown business level, you have to sort of systemize everything. Like for me, I have a buddy of mine who's a chef. And whenever I had new people come in, I would teach them, all the recipes and stuff like that. And so he came in and he was helping me out, and he told me, where's the recipes? And I showed him, and he basically was like, no, this is wrong. You need to have like, 10 grams this, 5 grams this, do mix this, like an actual recipe with measurements. And then that way it will be more, it'll be stable. Like everything will be consistent, right? That's the word I'm looking for. It'll be more consistent, because everyone here has a different palate. If I get a Thai person working, I've had Thai guys work in my kitchen, or Indonesians or Taiwanese, their sort of flavor palette is very different. So everybody's going to have like, this guy will have too much salt. This guy will have it too spicy. This guy will have like not enough salt. So you kind of got to get it to where you want it, and then break the recipe down. And then, that it's tough to hand those recipes over, but it's tough if you don't as well. Yeah. So definitely, I think a few books, I would say, The E-Myth Revisited. I think it's Michael Gerber. I'm not sure. The E-Myth Revisited. And also, I don't know, some people hate him, but Robert Kiyosaki's got his book, The Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was one of the first ones I read as well. And it's great because, a lot of people, like, for example, in that book, talks about his two dads, right? His one dad will talk about, he's an employee and the government's supposed to take care of everything and, buy the house and buy the car. And then, the other guy is the business owner and he's like, no, buy an old truck, don't spend money on this, make sure you have this and that. So it was a pretty good eye-opening experience for me. And yeah, I get to meet a lot of, it's good and bad, but this is a really good area. The area that I'm in is called Tianmu. It's kind of like a Beverly Hills of Taipei sort of thing. It doesn't look like it, but it's kind of like that where, international schools and pretty, well-off people live in this area. And so the pro is, there's never any, like for example, in Danshui at the end of the month, there's no business. And I would always ask other business owners what happened, and they're like, oh, you're at the, end of the month because people get paid beginning of the month. So end of the month, there's no money, and at the end of the year, same thing. They're like, oh, nian di, I'm like, what? And they're like, end of the year, no one has money. But the Tianmu doesn't have that problem. People here have traveled more, so it's good, but they also are very particular and they like to be taken care of a little bit better. And so, yeah, if you can do that, then it's definitely doable. And I think that a lot of people in this area are expat or Taiwanese that have traveled. So yeah, it's been pretty good. I think depends on your area, but yeah, just to kind of sum it all up, I'd say it's a mindset thing and really break your recipes down, and you have to give it to someone you trust, and you have to pay your main guys sort of well enough to where they don't really want to leave. Because it's tough. We've gone through all that, paying like the bare minimum, and then, people just keep leaving, and you just finish training this person and then they leave. And yes, it's tough. But now, because there's like the shortage of people, it's harder and harder. So we've got a good crew, like a good skeleton crew, but yeah, we're definitely looking for more people, and we do want to expand again, try some new things. I have a few ideas, but yeah, I probably won't mention them right now, but yeah, don't want to say too much about it, but yeah, we have some ideas for it. It'll be good. But yeah, mindset. And you just it's like giving your kid away. You take your kid to school, you drop your kid off at school, and the first day you're like nervous. You're like, dude, who's this person taking care of my kid? But eventually you're kind of like, okay, you got to kind of, you got to trust people and take care of them. And the good ones will stay usually, and the crappy ones kind of leave, and which is good too. And yeah, you have to learn to do that. Cause if you don't, then it becomes, a job forever. And you get to like, 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever, you want to retire. You want to give it to your kids, and it's a 50-50. If your kids are like, okay, cool, I'll keep on the family tradition. Or, they'll be like, no way, I seen you busting your ass my whole life. I'm not doing that. So then you close it or you sell it. And then the person who probably buys it comes in with the mindset of taking it, systemizing it, and then turning it into like McDonald's or something. So you got to try to figure that out. Yeah, if you can.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm thinking about that kind of long term. Where does the business want to end up? That's a tricky thing. It's no way you can really predict that. But I want to go back and talk about,
sure.
You are mentioning systemizing things, like creating standard operating procedures, like listing out the ingredients and exactly how much salt, exactly how much, pepper and blah, 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 so that every time you make it, it's the same product essentially. And I really appreciate that about some of my favorite restaurants. I can go back there. I mean, for sure, when you go to a lot of Japanese restaurants, you think like, well, this is like a military in here sometimes, where you're like, how do they do this thing? It's always this way. It's amazing. But, that can be applied to any.
The Japanese are super organized. Yeah. So they got it.
Those sushi restaurants, right? I bet if you went back there would be like one commander in the back, like monitoring everybody going, no, you're too fast.
Yeah. Well, like the Japanese, they have something that I looked at a long time ago. It's called 5S. I can't remember what it means, but it's like they're very organized and simplify. They simplify things, and yeah, super organized. So yeah.
But whenever you're creating those types of things, and I'm guessing you have this process not only in your kitchen, but probably for like handling money. You probably have a process for whenever you have new guests on your show and that kind of thing. Like, how do you go about like devising exactly what needs to be on that list for each individual or each job?
I mean, it starts very simple, because for you who's doing it, it's common sense, right? So you just kind of write down a couple things that you think people wouldn't know. And then when you're training someone, the list becomes longer and longer. And the checklist is like, okay, well, do this and that, because for you, it's common sense. But for the average person, there's this one YouTube guy that I like to watch, and he calls it the curse of knowledge, right? He says, all this stuff. And then you just kind of think, well, everybody knows that, right? And so when you're trying to teach something, if you don't do a good job, it's pretty apparent that, the stuff you thought was common knowledge is not. It's just because it's your common knowledge. So yeah, basically we try to break it down to everything. It's you just have to start off, with a simple sort of a checklist, and then it's definitely going to grow from there. It's tough. It's hard to say without sounding like an old man, but it's tough because now it seems with technology and smartphones and stuff like that, it's hard to, when someone comes in and they're new and they, they work in front of the house. I don't know if it's worldwide or just here. They've never washed a dish. They've never swept. They've never, it's pretty, they'll move tables without checking if there's glasses on the tables. And then you hear this big smash and it's like, oh man, it's pretty. So you're like, okay, I need to add to the list and add to the list. And you think, wow, where do I need to start? Open door, step in. So it's pretty tough to just keep stepping back and saying, how far back do I really need to make this? How thorough do I need to make this SOP? Because it gets crazy sometimes. I have a few new guys they're doing pretty good. They're young, but almost every single day they break something, and they just kind of look at you like it's nothing. And I'm like, well, there's not some free factory that gives me unlimited glasses and saucers. I have to go buy them, So, all of a sudden you have these pictures of whatever, you've had 20 for all these years, and then you get a new crew in, and then, a few weeks goes by and then there's 6, and you're like, well, where are the other ones? And they're like, I don't know. And then you see broken, them broken somewhere. So you're like, wow, okay. It's kind of crazy. That's tough. That's the tough part for sure.
Yeah. That goes back to that, trust thing and what you said about, they're not going to take it quite as seriously as you do, right? I mean, you're the business owner, you have all this knowledge that you've acquired through, a lot of hard work and lessons that you've learned by breaking stuff and then having to go and pay for it. And you're like, wow, that's not worth it. Let's be a little bit more careful now.
And the curse of knowledge is, like I was saying, something for you that's normal. For you, setting up this podcast, running it, organizing it, how you had your I don't know if it's Calendly or something like that, Tidy Cal. It's all set up, it's all sorted. For you, it's easy if it's normal. But, for somebody who's new, they would be like, well, I don't even know where to start. And maybe they don't even know how to use a computer. You don't know how far to go back to teach them, so it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Since we're talking about challenging kind of employees and,
Sure.
Other things, well, what are just some challenges that you've faced, either as a restaurant owner, a podcaster, or maybe a parent? And I understand your daughter's also streams video games.
She does.
I don't know whether you want to talk about that or not, but
sure,
just if you could enlighten us about maybe a time when something happened that you didn't expect, or it really threw you for a loop.
Okay. I have to think about that. But yeah, I would say all of them, the restaurant, the podcast, being a dad, they're all very different. I would say sometimes for the restaurant, again, you would get customers are happy. Sometimes customers are really happy. They're having a good time. Sometimes they're not happy, right? They come in, maybe they're going to wait. You tell them, hey, it's good. There's going to be a long wait, because we at the restaurant, we make everything, right? We make the food, we grind the corn for the tortillas. We basically do everything in house. And sometimes that's the good thing about a restaurant is, someone comes in, they're hungry, they want to eat, they have a good time, and then they leave. But the bad thing is they come when they're hungry, right? So if they have to wait for a long time, they get hangry, right? They get pissed. And when people are hangry, they can get unreasonable. Taiwanese people are not usually that's too bad, but sometimes they get crazy. Expats will get crazy a lot sooner than Taiwanese Americans or Canadians or Europeans or wherever. If they're hungry and they're waiting a while, they're not happy. So yeah, people will freak out. One time I remember at one of the previous restaurant, a guy ordered tacos and he wanted hard shell tacos. So we had to run out. So we had to remake the shells, and he ended up waiting a lot longer than he should. And we said, hey, do you want to change it to something else? Because it's going to be a long wait. And he's like, no. People are always like, yeah, no problem. Take your time. And we're like, no, it's going to be a long wait. And they're like, yeah, no problem. And I remember this guy, he's like an older American dude. And he ended up waiting a while. I can't, maybe half an hour, 35 minutes, maybe 40. And I mean, everybody at this table was already almost finished eating and he hadn't even got his food yet, which is understandable. So, he got pissed and then, my waitress, we go give him like an appetizer or something to hold him over. And then he starts like yelling at the waitress and we're like, okay. And then my wife goes over and he starts yelling at my wife and he's like super rude. And so usually when I go over, people won't yell at me, right? Because they, you're the owner, you're the boss, whatever. But this guy, he's also started yelling at me. And it was one of the few times where I got yelled at. And I'm like, okay, look, man, we told you it's coming. It's almost done. Apologize. And I was really like, how he says, sorry about that. Right. And he just kept going and like yelling. And I'm like, okay. And he's like almost standing up. And I'm like, don't do that. That's not a good idea. Cause I mean, I was like 30 and he's like 50 and he's like an old guy. And I mean, if you get in my face and scream at me, then everyone has a limit, right? So yeah, so he was about to get up and everybody was all embarrassed at his table. Then the food came and I'm like, here's your food. Just relax, So then I went up to the back, the back of the kitchen, put my head in the freezer for about 5 minutes, cooled off. I'm like, all right, good. Okay, go back to work. And, when he went to pay, I said, your stuff's free. I'm not taking yours. Everything's free. And he's like, well, no, I had, drinks and stuff. I'm like, that's all free. I'm like, I'm not taking anything. And he said, well, I want to take, I want to at least give you something. And I said, just don't really want to chat with you, man, but I'm not taking any money. So just enjoy the freebie. And yeah, I didn't say never come back, but I was like, yeah. So he never did come back, which was good. Now I couldn't even remember what he looked like. But yeah, there's situations like that where, someone will push you like to the brink of, you're like, what do I have to fight this guy in my restaurant? What is this? This is crazy, So that's only happened probably maybe once or twice. But yeah, that's the one that I can remember off the top of my head. Yeah, kind of crazy.
Yeah, I've definitely had an experience. I mean, I'm sure I used to work in restaurants.
Yeah.
But, I definitely had experience with, hangry people or just, just people that are not happy necessarily directly about the food. That could be anything in their life.
Yeah,
right. And they're
exactly.
just venting it at that moment.
Exactly.
But man, I've had restaurants. It's amazing to me that doesn't happen. What you just said is you comping a meal, like you just saying, look, don't worry about that. The cost of this, I'm going to give this to you for free. It's amazing that doesn't happen more to me in Taiwan for some reason. Last time I went to a restaurant here in town, and I swear I waited 45 minutes for something that I ordered off of the menu, and I was looking at everybody around me that came in after, and they all got their food, and I'm thinking, why no one's even come up to my table and like even said that like you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. And I'm just I'm sitting here like, I'm never coming back to this restaurant again. I'm never doing this again.
Definitely. Like we're supposed to, when it's backed up like that, we will tell people, there's going to be a wait. Like there was another time we show the fights, the UFC fights on Sunday, the pay-per-views. And I remember this one couple, one Taiwanese girl, younger, and then one was like a Latino guy. They're all, I would say, early 20s. They came in and there was one like 2-seater left and it was packed. And we told them, okay, they're like, yeah, table for two. We're like, it's kitchen's already super backed up. It's going to be a super long wait. And they're like, oh, there's a table there. I'm like, there is a table, but it's a very long wait. And when I say long, I'll say 1 hour. It won't ever be an hour. But if the food comes out in 30 minutes and they're expecting an hour, they're going to be like, hey, that was great. I'll be like an hour, and they're just like, yeah, no problem. So I went into the kitchen and I was helping out. And then, after about 20 minutes, I could see them like starting to scream at the staff. And after like 20 minutes, and I thought, oh God. And I went out and I'm like, yeah, the food's coming. They're like, oh, we've been waiting a long time. And I'm like, I fucking just told you, dude, it's a long wait, man. So that's why it's better to just be like, no, sometimes. I don't like to say no, but sometimes it's good. But yeah, so eventually we got their food out and they had this fajita platter with, tortillas and they get to share them. And build your own tacos type deal. And at the end, they wrapped it up and they said, we want, 6 more tortillas to go because we're going to take it and whatever. So, and it's fresh. So we went back in, made corn tortillas take longer. So, six more of those and then, packaged them up and stuff and brought them out. And I put them out on the counter there. And when they were paying, they started yelling. I think it was my wife or my manager. They start yelling at her and like, oh, we waited a long time, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, we're not paying the service charge. And I'm like, whatever, don't pay it. No big deal. And then they took their to-go bag and then there was the tortillas that I just put there. They grab them and they put them in their bag and and we're not paying for these. And I'm like, and I'm just also like, shoot, the place is full. I mean, I'm just thinking like, yeah, you guys, like, no problem. Don't pay for anything. Like, you just go. Don't pay for anything. You can just go. No problem. And then when they left, like 2 minutes later, I hear my phone notification, like ding, 1-star review. And it's this Taiwanese girl who puts this whole story. And then ding, 1-star review. The guy also puts the same story in. And I thought, man, so you probably could go onto the Eddy's Cantina thing and there's never 2 1-stars in a row aside from that time. So yeah, you could probably find them if anyone's curious. Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's talk about that for a second because, this is a new age we're kind of living in where there's so many. I mean, I've been to Taipei a number of times, right? And there's great options all in the area. And to tell you the truth, the only way I know to find restaurants in Taiwan particularly is to go on to Google Maps and to look at reviews. And so you're relying on that as a business owner these days. And we may start relying on that more for even social interactions. We don't know how far this is going to go, but, as a business owner, we're definitely relying, as a podcast, you're relying on reviews as well. Like subscribers. I see you got like 4,000, I think so many subscribers. I don't remember how many it was.
Yeah. 4,400 or something. Yeah. It looks like a lot. It's the slow process, but it's fun. It's fun. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. So definitely, yeah, like you were saying, yeah, definitely. That's a big part. Like when we travel, we want to go and we'll just Google restaurants near me and see what pops up and stuff like that. And yeah, definitely it's important. But here's from a restaurant owner, here's a tip. So if you're going and then you think maybe you want to try this one place out and you see a 1-star review, just give it a quick, read because there's a lot of people that are just nuts and they leave 1-star reviews and they're just not happy people. Right. So they could have had a crappy service, but there's a lot of really bad, just, social media where everybody has a voice, but not everyone should have a voice, because some of these people are just, I remember a Taiwanese family came in once and they had went to California or something and they came in and had just launched these, what do I call them? Like these sandwiches with a sauce on them. They're called a torta ahogada, like a swimming sort of a sandwich. It's got this sauce on it. And it's really like a street food from where my family comes from, right? And I was, I finally got the bread that I needed and it was sorted. And this family comes in, there's 4 orders and one, the nachos, enchiladas, and then a fish tacos. And then order number 4 was, the special. And so we got it and they're picking out, everyone enjoyed it. And then, I'm watching this lady look at the sandwich and then she calls the manager over and she's just like, I want to talk to the owner. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, how's it going? And she's like, oh, good. The nachos and the tacos, everything is great. We love it. And then she points at the sandwich. She's like, but this sandwich, this is not Mexican. And I'm like, oh, well, actually this sandwich comes from, Guadalajara. It's like a very famous street food. And that's kind of like one of the main street foods. When I go back to eat, that's kind of like the thing where my family lives. And she's like, yeah, no, it's not Mexican food. And I'm like, okay, so if you didn't like it, then I'll just take it off the bill. No problem. And she's just like, well, but I just want to tell you that, this is not Mexican food. And I said, well, actually, if you Google torta ahogada, you'll see that it's a very famous street food in Mexico. And she's like, I lived in San Diego for 3 months. I know Mexican food. That's what she told me. And I thought, okay, you know what? Let me take it away, take it off the bill and end this conversation right here and now. So enjoy. Yeah. So you get crazy interactions like that sometimes. And it's just It's just how it is, man. Yeah.
That's cracking me up, man. I
I
love that
know.
story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Because I love that whole scenario where, because it happens all the time, right? I do it myself every once in a while.
Yep.
You'll have an idea of what something should be,
Mhm.
right? And then you go somewhere and then it
Yeah, for
defies
sure.
your expectation of
For
that
sure.
thing. And you're like, no way, this can be this, what I think it is, right? And then, but sometimes people don't even bother to evaluate the situation. We're like, oh, maybe you know something that I don't know.
Yeah. So usually I'll just be like, I'll take it off the menu. And my wife is Taiwanese and she'll just be like, she's about to like rip this person apart. I'm like, no, I will go talk to them. Don't worry about it. And then I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. I take it off your bill. All good. And because it's easier for me to do that than to be like, have an argument about what's Mexican and stuff, So I'm like, you know what? It's fine. All good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for a second, do you have any suggestions or advice for people that, are starting a new business, maybe a restaurant, or whether it be, some kind of content creation? And,
Yeah.
do you have any ways that you're promoting that? Are you like staying active on these platforms so that, you can get more viewers? Or, I mean, is your podcast your main kind of outlet point for the restaurant? Like what have you found works best?
The podcast was separate completely from the restaurant. In the beginning, I wanted to keep it just completely separate from the restaurant. And then eventually I figured, what the heck am I doing? These things go hand in hand, right? So yeah, but at the beginning, I wanted to keep it separate. But now, yeah, for the last maybe 2 years, we do it in the restaurant. It's always been there. And yeah, I always encourage customers to come on a Tuesday night and watch it live. They can watch it live. It's a Taco Tuesday. They can have some tacos and a show. I try to encourage them to subscribe. And then I've been this year decided really to take the podcast more seriously. And so, yeah, and I've learned a lot about, for example, new example, actually, we've been making hot sauce for, I don't know how many years. Like we've been making and bottling them. And the only time we ever sell a bottle is when somebody, they're eating and they have some of our hot sauce and they're like, wow, this is awesome. You should bottle this. And we're like, yeah, we do. And they're like, okay, I'll take one. That's the only time we would ever sell. So recently, I think, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks ago, we bought some bottles and I made a bunch of hot sauce. And so we bottled a few, like 5 or 6 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, let's take some pictures and I'll post it. And I posted it on social and I put, in a few places. And everyone was like, oh, congratulations on your new hot sauce. Congratulations on your new hot sauce. And then we sold like couple days, I had to make another batch because we just blew through it. And people were like, oh, congratulations. Can you ship to Kaohsiung? Can you ship to Tainan? Congratulations. And I got so many congratulations. And I'm like, I've been making this hot sauce for like 10 years. Like, what are you talking about? But if nobody knows that you're doing it, then, how can they support you? Right. So I recently bought, I like to always keep learning. So I recently got this sort of a YouTube kind of a course, a sort of video ranking academy thing. And that was one of the things that I learned from there. Like, if nobody knows, then how are they supposed to support you? So yeah, definitely. So I thought, well, let me try something. And then, yeah, we sold a whole bunch of hot sauce. And, I'm thinking about doing a couple of other things as well, because we have a lot of people that cater. And when they want to do tacos or something, we'll sell tortillas and stuff to them. But one of the popular ones is the hard shell tacos, right? And we make our own corn tortillas and then we kind of, we shape them and then we fry them. And so we make our own shells as well. And people love them and they're always like, where did you get those? And I'm like, well, we make them. And so, yeah, I'll probably put together some kind of like, taco kit or whatever as well soon and start selling that. Cause people are always asking. And then only when they ask is when they know, like, yeah, sure. Of course you can buy this, you can buy that. But if you actually tell people, hey, I got this, support me, they will. They will. But if they don't know, they can't.
Right. And just to clarify, like when you say tell people about it, like how are you actually going about doing that?
Just posting. I just posting on my YouTube community thing, my community tab, even my personal Facebook page, my Facebook restaurant page, my podcast Facebook page, just everywhere. You would just post them up there. And people were like, wow, can you ship to Mexico? Can you ship to Canada? I'm like, probably. But, like I never thought about, I'm just putting this post up there just to see if I can flip these 6 bottles that we made, and we just blasted through those bottles and people are like, okay, I'm coming up this weekend. Save me a bottle, save me a bottle. And just definitely post wherever you post, There's also a lot of Facebook groups. Like I'm in a buddy's hot sauce Facebook, fan page thing. And they're always asking, hot sauce questions. And I've never posted on there. And I always see people recommending these other hot sauces that I've tried and are not very good. And I thought, you know what? You should try mine. And they'll be like, yeah. If I ever come, I'll try it. But now I post it on there. I'm like, hey, I've got these ones for sale, ship all over Taiwan. And it's like, boom, sold. So you're like, yeah. So the easier you can make it, the better. So we have an online ordering system. Let me just finish that up. Online ordering system that we made just before COVID. And the best thing you can do, we're still working on this, but it's almost done, is like to be like the link. And the link, it goes right to this page that says this hot sauce, put your credit card or whatever in, boom. And it'll go like right to your door, because the more sort of friction points, I guess, like if it's like, okay, you got to do this. Okay. Then you got to call me and then you got to message me. And then you got to, you got to give me your bank info. And then you got to do this. And then you got your address and then find the nearest 7-Eleven. Then nobody's going to do it. Right. So if you have like a really, like, here's the link, pay first. If they pay first, then they'll go through all that hassle. But if they're, you get in there and they're like, got to do all that. It's like, nah, it's like a YouTube video where you're like, I want to learn how to, so let's say I've got this green wall painted back here. I'm like, I learn how to remove the green wall or whatever from, the video. And especially now, if you look at a video, you put that in and the first one pops up and it's like 60 seconds, you're like, oh, I could learn that. Or if you put it in and it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes, no one's going to watch that, right? Because they're like, well, I do want to learn it. Maybe I'll save it. But if it's like, this is it and no friction, like I can learn it in a minute, let's go. So that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Definitely, like removing the friction out of any process is going to, have a higher percentage of people that's going to follow through with that action that you're trying to get them to take, and having that single link that they can go to is very direct. But what I was going to ask you is, do you feel like your social media presence, like your podcast, for instance, has helped you? Are you using that to leverage, the kind of power that you have, like the followers? You said that you can message people, but some people don't have a presence. Let's say like me, I don't use a lot of Facebook, for instance, but I will utilize it for certain things. And I'm just starting out. So it's hard whenever you're first starting out to kind of reach those people. Do you have any advice that might be in that for people that might be in that situation?
I think I got the most sales from my personal Facebook page. Just people that are like your friends and people that like your business or your restaurant. So my personal Facebook page is, for personal stuff, but it's also like still people will mostly, like if I post on my restaurant page and I post on my personal page, more people will still see it, I think, on my personal page. So I think, yeah, you just start with your friends. And I think, there's things like Reddit. If you could you probably know more about Reddit than I do, but like there's like Reddit groups and Facebook groups and stuff like that. And I mean, I think if you're kind of active in you don't have to be super active, but if you're in there and you see something that it's like, hey, I need a cool, cheap USB mic for podcasts, and one, you just jump on, be like, oh, this is what I think. This is what I started with or whatever. And then people slowly start to kind of gravitate towards you. If you're like going in, like homeschooling moms groups and saying, buy my hot sauce, then, nobody's, you become that spammer guy that nobody likes, right? And you get kicked out of the group. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's a slower process, just kind of building up. Yeah.
All right, cool. I guess, try to wrap it up here in the last couple of minutes. And I know we didn't talk too much about, your work-life balance directly. And you mentioned that, you got UFC kind of interests, as in like you watch that. Are there any other maybe personal interests or passions or maybe, things about your family that you want to share?
So basically, I'm because of technology, I think these, in this kind of day and age, you can kind of focus, like hyper focus on the things you like. So I definitely, I don't watch much sport, but UFC, I like to watch, and I like to show the fights. But also because I've got all this gear already for the podcast, my daughter, we'll stream like video games and stuff like that. So she likes to stream like Roblox. I don't know if you probably don't have kids, but like there's a kids game, like a Minecraft.
I never played the game, but I teach enough students to know what Roblox is.
So Roblox is kind of like a modern Minecraft for kids that's free. And so there's a lot of in-game purchases, but to get it, it's free. You can get it on your iPad or your cell phone, whatever. So we live stream that one. She likes that. Yeah, the restaurant is good. The work-life balance is, I mean, if as an entrepreneur, there's like no days off, which is kind of crazy. You feel like you're living in like chaos a little bit, but as soon as you get comfortable with that, then I think it's okay. Yeah, it's a little crazy because it's like the grass is always greener. Let's say you're an employee. For me, that's my example of teaching English and stuff like that. And you're like, you want to teach it and then you want to kind of save up. And then you're like, I want to try to do something myself. And then when you're doing something yourself, a lot of the times you're working a lot more for a lot less money. Right. And then you're like, shoot, I had it so easy when I was teaching. Right. So it's kind of, if you can hold out long enough, then it kind of catches up. But I know that a lot of restaurants, they don't, I think it's the first year they close and then another, I think it's 80 or something percent in the first year. And then up the last 20%, like another 10% in the next 5 years. And then by like 9 or 10 years, it's like less than 1% or something that are still there. And I think I always say it's the work to reward ratio. I think that there's so much work that has to go in at the beginning, especially and then the money that comes back, you're just like, wow, this is less than I made, working like 2-3 hours a day teaching. So yeah, you have to really like what you're doing. And if you do, then yeah, I would say keep going. I would say keep trying. And that's the same with the podcast, with YouTube. It takes a while to grow. I mean, you're saying like, I think I have like 4,400 or something, 4,500, something like that subscribers. And I mean, a lot of people are like, wow, that's a lot. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's, 4 or 5 years. That's not much. But it's yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. It's kind of perspective. And yeah, like I said, this year, I want to take that more seriously. And I'm learning a lot I'm always trying to learn from people that are a little bit ahead of me. So yeah, and I'm always happy to share if I can share. So yeah, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really great to hear your perspective and, from somebody that's kind of similar background to me, I guess, to tell the truth, even though I'm from the States, we moved over here, we started teaching, and then you have a business and you've kept, chugging away at it. And I'm glad to hear that it's going well for you. You have seemed like all your ducks in a row. And
yeah, they have to be sometimes, or else, one gets away and you're like on this wild goose chase and you get back and you're like, what day is it? Customer asks you for the special and you're like, oh, it's Taco Tuesday. So it's, whatever. And they're just like, oh, it's Thursday. And I'm like, okay. I thought it was Tuesday. Yeah. You're way off sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the crazy things is, it's been like, I don't know, 16 plus years and there's so many people. And sometimes people will come like, every week. Sometimes they'll come like once a year and you can't possibly remember everybody. So you just try to just be nice to, just try to be nice to everybody. And a lot of people will be like, hey, this is my friend. He's the owner. Da, da, da. And then I'll have absolutely no clue who this person is. But you're just like, hey, if it's in Chinese, hey, how jian, type thing. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So sometimes if people will ask me the name of somebody, then I'm like, don't ask me, please, because I have no clue. Faces, not too bad, but names are tough. Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely show your face in the picture here to promote this episode with me, and definitely give everybody the links to go check out Eddy Live. You can look at all the content you have on YouTube, on your favorite podcasting platform, and obviously, if you happen to be in Taipei, in the Tianmu area, you can definitely look you up and maybe either get some peppers from you if you're lucky enough to be in that right bubble of time, or you can order some hot sauce or who knows? You got some new things cooking up. You said maybe you have another location or something different.
Yeah, I'd like to. There's a few things I'm looking at and working on. So yeah, just have to, like you were saying, with having the family involved, it can be good, but it also can be like, for example, I work with my wife. So sometimes, that's all we talk about. And then it's like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. So just, let me watch my movie. But it's tough sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah, man. Well, any last words of advice? I think what you said earlier was incredible, but anything else you want to leave people with or places you want to point people to?
Yeah. I mean, if you guys are ever up in Taipei in the Tianmu area and you want to get some Mexican food, it's not like a typical sort of Mexican restaurant. We started with sort of like a hole in the wall style, but now it's a little bit more of a Western vibe where you still get all the same Mexican goodies, but you also get, you can get your chicken wings and your sliders and stuff like that. And everything's homemade and it's good. And if you're ever up on a Tuesday night, come down and catch a live show. We do them at 7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. live in the restaurant. And it's cool when you have the lights up and people walk by and they're like, hey, what's going on in here? They'll come in and check it out. And yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to do hand in hand. And if you were thinking about starting something, then I'd say go for it. Give it a shot because, you never know what will happen. The worst that can happen is it doesn't work out. And then you go back to teaching or to wherever it is you were doing before. And you don't have to be wondering like, oh man, I should have took that shot. So I think take that shot, go for it, and see what happens. Yeah.
Excellent words of advice. Well, I appreciate you taking the time again, Ed, and I hope to see you up in Taipei soon. My pleasure, man. Whenever you have a chance, come on up. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching and checking us out. And yeah, thank you so much. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, it's inspiring to hear the passion and resilience Edward Gonzalez brings to both his restaurant business and podcast endeavors. And it's certainly not easy to choose only 3 takeaways as I soak in the wisdom from our discussion. But here's what stood out to me. Number 1, systematize operations and delegate. Professionals and amateurs in the restaurant and service industry can benefit from Edward's emphasis on systematizing operations and standardizing procedures. Adopting practices from books such as The E-Myth Revised and Rich Dad Poor Dad, and delegating tasks using a structured approach can lead to improved consistency and efficiency in the workplace. Number 2, prioritize marketing and promotions. Eddy's success in promoting his restaurant products, such as hot sauce and homemade taco shells, through social media and online ordering systems serves as a reminder for professionals and amateurs to prioritize marketing and promotional activities. Creating simple and frictionless purchasing processes and leveraging various platforms can help increase customer reach and engagement. Number 3, take care of employees. Building a team with a strong work ethic and passion requires trust and investment. Offering fair compensation and establishing a positive work environment can lead to employee retention and success. I hope you found this conversation as insightful and thought-provoking as I did. Remember to join me next time on Field Talk for more engaging discussions and valuable takeaways. Also, if you'd like to show your support and help the podcast continue to grow, please subscribe and share however you can. Furthermore, if you have ideas for future guests or constructive feedback, you can reach out by sending an email to dream@ideafield.pro or visiting my website, ideafield.pro, to get in touch. Until next time, stay compassionate and creative.